Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Executive. My name is Councillor Paul Follows. I'm the leader of the Council and Chairman of the Executive. Fiona, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillors Penny Marriott, Kiki Mirrlees, Peter Clark and Nick Palmer.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Members of the Executive, are you happy for us to agree the minutes of the 7th of February published on the website? Thank you. Declarations of interest, Fiona.
None received.
Thank you. Questions from the public, Fiona?
None received.
And questions from members?
None received.
Thank you. We are missing a few of our number this evening, so we'll try and keep the leader and portfolio holders updates fairly swift. I've only got one update, which I know at least two members will probably expand upon, particularly this week. A number of us, certainly in this room, Councillor Rivers, Councillor Williams, Councillor Townsend and I, as well as a number of our colleagues from Godalming Town Council, attended the Royal Courts of Justice on Thursday to listen to the permission hearing for our continuing quest to seek a judicial review against the, I can't call it fracking, but the unconventional drilling in Dunsfold within Waverley. I'm very pleased to report that we were successful in that, and I just want to give a great big thanks to our legal team, certainly also to Mr. Stephen Ricks here for the work that he's been putting into it, the Protect Dunsfold people and the Good Law Project people as well for all the work they've done. We've got a fairly interesting set of outcomes from that I'm sure Councillor Williams in particular will elaborate on. But other than that, just to renew that thanks to everybody for all the work they've done. Obviously, the judicial review will be pending, so there'll be some more work to do and probably some more money to find at some point, but that's a discussion probably for another day when we know the details. On that note, I will hand over to others, starting in alphabetical order with Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Leader. I'll keep my statement pretty brief as you're requesting. On Brightwells, there's a board meeting coming along this Friday, so I don't think it's appropriate to say much more about Brightwells in advance of that meeting. In terms of enforcement, I had a meeting today with Richard Homewood, who's responsible for enforcement, and Richard is working at the moment on looking to collaborate, coordinate the enforcement activities between Waverley and Guildford, so we can look forward to a review of how enforcement works and hopefully some savings resulting from the combining the worst of the two councils. I think I'll leave it at that. And in terms of the car parking side, again, I had a meeting with Kelvin Mills recently, and we're pleased to report that actually the car parking revenues are moving forward again towards what they were before the COVID and so on and so forth. And we're doing a review of the Wayhill site in Hazelmere. So that's all I need to say at the moment, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor MacLeod. Next on my list, I have Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Leader. Actually, I'm going to pass this evening. There's a few things that I'd like to talk about, but apparently I'm not allowed to at the moment. So I'll wait till next time.
And we'll eagerly await that next time, considering the subject matter. Councillor Mirrlees is away, Councillor Palmer's away, Councillor Rivers.
Thank you, Leader. Well, the most exciting thing, you've heard some exciting things already, but this is the most exciting thing, that Homes and People magazine is so hot off the press. It's too hot to handle to show it to you, but maybe tomorrow, Andrew, you think, or when?
I hope so, Councillor Rivers, and it does feature articles by myself and my portfolio holders, so please do read and eat and inwardly digest, and plenty of good things there to nourish the soul and the mind.
So perfectly said. I couldn't add more. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Leader. I've got a number of items on the agenda this evening, so I will wait until I deliver those. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Leader. And inevitably, I mean, I would like to endorse your thanks, Paul, to our officers to Protect Dunsfold and the Good Law Project, Extinction Rebellion, and all those gathered at the Royal Courts of Justice last Thursday. And, you know, following the long and drawn out saga of Waverley's opposition to the proposal to drill for hydrocarbons in Dunsfold, which started way back in June 2019 when we held a listening exercise in this chamber and listened to the kind of extent of public opposition to the proposal. And following the Secretary of State overturning Surrey County Council's refusal to grant planning permission to UCOG to undertake onshore drilling, it was clear that to be consistent, we would need to follow this through and seek a judicial review. It was a moral imperative, I think, to challenge this fossil fuel company. First, because it was predatory exploitation of our Surrey countryside, adverse effects on the safety and well-being of local communities, local residents, local businesses, wildlife, habitats, ecology, the area of great landscape value and the neighbouring area of outstanding natural beauty. But secondly, and very importantly, because we are living through a climate emergency, and if we are to take the climate emergency seriously, there is absolutely no doubt that our current reserves of fossil fuels should stay in the ground. And what was heartening last Thursday was not just that we were granted a judicial review, but that the grounds to be considered in judicial review will not just encompass impact on landscape and the AONB and the AGLV, but will also need to encompass impact on greenhouse gases. So we're clearly waiting with anticipation for the judicial review, which is going to follow from this case. And a judgment arising from such a judicial review could have far-reaching implications for the future of onshore drilling across the UK. And it's clear to me that if we are to take seriously the climate crisis, there is no doubt that fossil fuels need to stay in the ground, whether that is coal in Cumbria or natural gas in Dunsfold. And that concludes my portfolio holders report for this executive meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Okay, moving on to item 7, just to advise that item 7 is the recommendations from the special ONS resources on the Oxford Ridge refurb. And as that is the substance of agenda item 8, I will be moving straight to item 8, where we will consider both items together. Councillor Rivers, I imagine you're going to be introducing the recommendations and also the substance.
Yes, I have that pleasure, Leader. I'll take some guidance from you. I have quite a significant report, which may sit better in the minutes rather than me reading it out in detail, but I would start, and I'll skim through bits of it. I would start quite clearly with a big thank you to the Resources Overview and Scrutiny Committee for scrutinising a report possibly with the longest ever name, the Oxford Ridge Refurbishment Phase 4 Deep Refit Retrofit Green Technology Pilot Report, which could be shortened. And that is indeed one of their recommendations. Yeah, so there are 5 recommendations. I think we agree with all of them, and we have provided, Louisa Blundell has done all of the important work here, has provided additional information to complete their requests. Just refer to the second one, where the Scrutiny Board said the title of the project should be changed to make clear that the majority of the cost, 70%, relates to a high quality refurbishment project with retrofit of green technology as the minority cost, 30%. And so we are suggesting, if you remember the original name of the report, to change it to Oxford Ridge Refurbishment Phase 4 Deep Retrofit, including Green Technology Pilot Report, which I think is on balance a much catchier title. So with your agreement, I'll leave these for the minutes. Are you happy with that?
I very much am happy with that. And I'm sure, Louisa, if you would like to try and find a longer name for the next project, we will all enjoy that. In terms of what this project does, of course, this is enabling the implementation of these sorts of green technologies. I'm going to next time perhaps describe Dunsfold Park as a road with perhaps some houses that might be there at some point, because, you know, obviously that's the main feature, isn't it? So yeah, I think we all understand why this is being done in this way. Are there any comments from the executive on the actual substance of this? Councillor Williams.
Only to endorse the inclusion of the green technology pilot, because as I think you say, Leader, it is crucially important that we have the information in order to move forward with decarbonisation of our housing stock in line with our carbon neutrality action plan.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Leader. No, just to recognise that in some of the discussions I've heard, that there does seem to be a perception that technology is all about the electronics and the gadgets, the boilers and the heat pumps and the PV cells and everything that goes with it. I think that there's an equal value, even a greater value, in the technology and the insulation and the all of the other stuff that goes into a house. It can be more effective and it can be more efficient, and it shouldn't be underestimated.
Exactly, and one of the things that this pilot will hopefully do is demonstrate the value of that aspect of those refurbs, so that we know where to focus our increasingly finite resources when it comes to actually helping residents deal with their bills and keep their homes warm without costing the earth. Any other comments from anybody else? Councillor MacLeod.
Just very briefly, Leader, having been involved in procurement exercise myself as with previous life, I'm just impressed with how thorough the work is. Actually, I've seen, particularly in the confidential papers, which I obviously can't talk about, but seems to me a very thorough work has been done both by the officers and by their advisors. That's all I wanted to say, Leader. Thank you.
And that was very clear listening to the ONS that had been undertaken. And as somebody who in my present life is stuck with doing quite a lot of procurement activities, this very much is a very well done piece of work. So thank you. Right, any comments before I move into the recommendations? Okay, I am not going to read the fairly lengthy recommendations, but recommendation 1, all those in favour? Thank you. And finally, recommendation 2, to agree the additional budget and allocations and commence the works. Thank you. Okay, moving on then to item 9, the Affordable Housing SPD, which I believe is with Councillor Townsend.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And first of all, I'd like to thank officers for all of their work on this and for in carrying out the update and for being very helpful to me in presenting this evening on behalf of Councillor Palmer. Local Plan Part 1 requires us to have an affordable housing supplementary planning document, and this forms a material consideration when we are considering planning applications. This document includes details of how we calculate financial contributions from developers, the type and size of affordable housing required across the borough, and what mechanisms should be applied if developers challenge the council's affordable housing policy on viability grounds. And it was also subject to a 4-week public consultation. The original supplementary planning document was adopted in April 2021, and an update is now required in order to take into account changes in national planning policy, or national policy rather, and to reflect this administration's commitment to lower rents. As you know, we live in one of the least affordable boroughs in England, whether that is for buying a property, which is obviously out of reach for many, renting through the private sector, or renting through an affordable housing provider at rents which are usually set at about 80% of market rates. At an average rent of approximately 1,100 plus per month, this can still be out of reach for many on lower incomes. And as we are all aware, rent levels have risen by about 1/4 over the past 5 years. This administration has committed in our corporate strategy as a priority to delivering good quality housing for all income levels and age groups. and this supplementary planning document goes some way to achieving this. We are committed to delivering locally affordable homes that local workers and households on low incomes can afford. Social rents for householders on the lowest incomes remain a priority for the council. However, when this is not viable, affordable rents should be capped at about 70% for 1 and 2 bedroom properties and 65% for 3 and 4 bedroom homes. We also now need to accommodate the government's policy requirement for 25% of affordable homes on development sites, which must now be first homes. This national policy does have the unfortunate impact of potentially skewing the types of homes that can be provided under this scheme due to the £250,000 price cap post any discount on the properties that come under this scheme. This purchase price results in an over-reliance on 1 and 2 bedroom flats, and this property type may end up conflicting with the size of properties actually required on a development site. However, this is now government policy and we have no option but to adopt this and to include this in the supplementary planning document. This scheme also updates the affordable housing mix recommendations. Previously, our aim was to provide 70% of the affordable housing quota as social or affordable rented properties, which obviously are, the social rents are the most affordable within Waverley, and 30% as intermediate shared ownership properties. With first homes coming into the intermediate ownership mix, this means that unfortunately we need to reduce down the social affordable rented properties to now 60% of the mix, and the intermediate shared ownership percentage increases to 40% to build in that first homes requirement. This update clarifies the point as well that all applications seeking to amend or reduce affordable housing provision will go to committee for a decision, following the addition of this new requirement in the Waverley scheme of delegation to officers, which was approved by full council on the 18th of October 2022. The purpose of this report is to seek the executive's approval for the updated affordable housing supplementary planning document to be recommended to go forward to full council for formal adoption as a material planning consideration, which I very much hope members here will be able to support. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. I mean, again, this shows our commitment collectively to ensuring that we do the absolute maximum that we can within the relatively narrow policy envelope the government allows us on this particular subject. It is, of course, a shame that we have to consider, I think an officer who will remain nameless called it a zombie policy at one point in a previous meeting that we have to accommodate through this. And certainly I was having a conversation with a resident yesterday about effectively trying to illustrate that it's not just that we need social and affordable housing, it's actually certain types we need more than others. And this properly reflects the changes in that needs mix. And so is obviously an extremely useful and important document nonetheless. Any other comments from any members of the exec? Nope, in which case the recommendation is recommended that the executive recommends to full council that the updated affordable housing supplementary planning document be adopted. Can I have all those in favour please show? Thank you very much indeed. Item 10, the draft updated air quality action plan and draft clean air strategy for Waverley. I believe this sits with Councillor Williams to introduce, and I have one speaker following that.
Okay, thank you. We will be aware that an air quality action plan is required in any local authority with air quality management areas with exceedances beyond the statutory levels. And in Waverley, we have got 2 such air quality management areas, one in Farnham and one in Godalming. We need to do all we can with partners, with other organisations, with Surrey County Council, particularly as the Highways Authority, who have more capacity than us to get to the root of the problem to improve air quality in these areas. However, I have long been keen to ensure that we have a much wider strategy to improve air quality across the borough, and we have therefore developed for the first time a clean air strategy, which covers the entirety of the borough. And I'd like to thank our Waverley officers and our external consultants for all their work on these documents, which have been considered in a couple of draft iterations by the executive, previously by the Air Quality Steering Group, by the Climate Emergency Board, by the Services Overview and Scrutiny, all of whom have brought forward pertinent comments, both before and after going to a wider public consultation. And the version that's before you today is the version that incorporates much of that which was raised in that consultation process. Air quality is an issue that has been of increasing concern and has particularly been highlighted since the untimely death of 9-year-old Ella Adukisi Deborah, attributed to air quality in Lewisham some time back. And we need to do everything in our power to improve air quality in this borough and do as much as we can to facilitate improvements and to press for improvements that lay in the hands of others. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I've got one registered speaker, which is Councillor Hyman. Jerry, over to you.
Thank you. Good evening. Yes, there are within the papers some pages and annex of the responses to the consultation. I just wanted to point out that my own responses there have been misrepresented somewhat, in as much as I pointed out that this isn't a plan, it's a plan to have a plan. There is a requirement in law that an air quality action plan, and it's set out, I hope you'll ask your officers to confirm that I'm reading this correctly, but it's the Environment Act 2021 under section 83A, and it requires that, and I quote, 83A5 says, an action plan must set out particular measures the local authority will take to secure the achievement and maintenance of air quality standards and objectives in the area to which the plan relates, and must, in relation to each measure, specify a date by which it will be carried out. So you've got to detail the measures and say when they're going to be done by, and it's implicit, therefore, that also the funding has to be sorted. And this isn't a plan, it's a plan to wait 6 months. If you turn to page 193, this paragraph is considered on page 193. There's one paragraph about Farnham measures and the Farnham infrastructure project, saying that we're going to wait 6 months and look at it. Well, this is a plan to have a plan in 6 months' time, obviously, quite obviously, and nobody could say otherwise. There is no plan at the moment because the Surrey County Council don't have the plan. Nothing has been modelled, and the only things that they've got are things which the public threw out during the COVID period because it caused gridlock, and they want to create worse by taking apart the contraflow system, which would all cause far greater congestion in Farnham. So this isn't. My understanding is this is going to the ONS next week, so I don't know what you're agreeing tonight. Your recommendation certainly doesn't make sense in as much as that it's going to go for scrutiny next week, and presumably if the Conservatives, if they're clever, are going to turn around and say this isn't lawful. Look, it's blindingly obvious, as it is to anyone, that this is not an AQAP, it's an ASR. You can adopt it as an ASR quite lawfully. But as it's not an air quality action plan, the only measure there which would help to maintain and ensure that we maintain the levels. And that, of course, is irrespective of the far lower levels that the World Health Organization wish us to put in place, but which the English government's, British government's holding back on at the moment. Though those would, and you can check with officers, please, they would reduce the NO2 limit from 40, as it is at the moment, to 30 and then 20 and then 10 successively. So obviously the idea, which has been introduced on page 193, of getting rid of the the air quality management area and the requirement to do anything about the air quality problems in Farnham. Because the intention is to get rid of that as soon as possible, it says. It will be ensured that the AQMA will remain in place until the Farnham infrastructure programme is implemented. It says there, well, obviously you've got to wait years and test that the thing's working and that you haven't just shifted the problem to everywhere else in Farnham from the congestion you caused. So, and we have been told that on the basis of the 2 years during COVID years where the levels have gone below the legal limit, we don't have to take effectively, we don't have to take a lawful approach. We can ignore the fact that we've had exceedances ever since time began. We've never had a proper AQAP with proper plans. We haven't got one now, and this is just an attempt to carry on pretending to you that we've got an air quality action plan, pretending to our residents. I don't think our residents will fall for it, and I think it would be a very silly thing to do this close to election, to simply pretend we've got an air quality action plan when we haven't. Legally, it's not a plan. It hasn't got the measures detailed in there and the funding and the and the dates for it. It says here on page 193 that we haven't, so there's no arguing with that. It's a shame that Surrey did not invite Waverley and a consultant who I can see is with us to participate in the Farnham infrastructure programme. Air quality was washed over by Surrey County Council.
Can you wrap it up, Jerry?
Happy to, but yes, the point obviously it's not an air quality action plan, and so to adopt it as such when it's going to go to for scrutiny next week, I think is silly. So recommend that it goes for scrutiny and then comes back to the 21st when you've got a special exec, I think is penciled in, so that you can look at it properly. Thanks. Sorry, I seem to have lost the chamber here.
Apologies, Councillor Hyman, you haven't. I'm just checking a couple of things in the papers right now. Just give me just 2 seconds. Can I ask just Richard Homewood just particularly one question? Is this going back to ONS again? Because there seems to be, in my mind, some conflict between the core recommendation and then the governance journey section of the paper.
It has been to ONS, I understand.
Yes, Chair. The timetable that we set for this when we worked on this back in September included it going back to ONS next week on its way to full council on the 21st for adoption. So the intention was that any additional new comments from ONS would be reported verbally to the full council meeting.
Okay, right. In which case, let me just try and tackle a couple of other issues in this, and I'm sure Councillor Williams will jump in as well. In terms of there being funding and measures for some of these, well, I completely appreciate that some of them are not funded, but you have to know that in order to try and seek funding sources. I mean, the first one, just to take this as an example of one that is not funded, although I will add that in the vast majority of cases, it does say the funding status, it does say approximately what there is now and what the deficit is, and it does have a time that it's in effect to and when it's measured. So a number of the points that you made there in terms of its legal compliance, as far as I can see, are in the table multiple times as having information completed in them.
I'm sorry, but that's not the case, Leader. You've misunderstood that. The only measure which is substantive and makes any difference.
Please don't make me.
Lost you again.
I think the council chamber on mute.
Can I? Councillor Williams, if you wouldn't mind just commenting on any of Jerry's particular points, but also could you just also outline so that it's clear for the public, anybody looking at this, where the statutory obligations actually lie on this? Because my understanding is that this is not all really with us.
No, that's absolutely right. The statutory responsibility is for Waverley to draw up, to develop or to lead on the air quality action plan, as far as I understand it, and our consultant Claire can clarify any of those issues. if there's further clarification needed. But I just really wanted to say that Councillor Hyman did suggest that his responses were misrepresented in the summary. Councillor Hyman's response was somewhat lengthy. It received a very lengthy response and have, like other responses, been summarised in the document. He has, of course, had an opportunity to clarify those points in his contribution. This is a clear air quality action plan that has gone through a great deal of extended discussion. It has been amended, it has been added to as a result of discussions that have taken place with the air quality steering group, with executive, with the climate emergency board, and overview and scrutiny. There were very many valid points that were made, and we sought to make this as tight and as effective a clean air strategy as it could possibly be. And we had a well-skilled consultant in Claire Beattie to work with us on that, and I'm very pleased and very proud to be able to present to executive today that document. Clearly, it is going back to Overview and Scrutiny Committee in order to add anything further that has not so far been covered in the rather extended discussions that we've had, including extended commentary from Councillor Hyman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Richard, did you want to add anything there?
Well, just briefly, Chair, obviously this is an air quality action plan. It's a DEFRA template, and this will be submitted to DEFRA for their approval. So DEFRA will have the last word on whether this is actually an action plan or not.
So just to confirm, irrelevant of what scrutiny says and what the council says, if DEFRA will essentially assess this for lawfulness under their own rules, and if they don't agree, they won't pass it. So we can equally assume that if they do pass it, they consider it lawful.
That's correct, Chair.
Okay, understood. Can I just double check, what day is this going to ONS?
The 14th.
Right, in which case, Councillor Hyman, in light of your comments, I will certainly go to that ONS myself, so I can see if I can seek some of the answers to that as well, just to make sure that before we go to council and this is introduced, that I'm at least as aware of this as I can be. But I think as far as I'm concerned, if we get to the point where DEFRA throw this out, I think we have to concede you were correct. But I hope you will agree with me that if DEFRA don't do that, that you would consider it a lawful document and in compliance with their own rules.
No, it's the law they have to comply with, not their own rules. And the law is clear in what it
Councillor
says.
Hyman, can you not keep interjecting in the exec meeting, please? I'm trying to be reasonable with this, but you can't keep doing that. Okay. Any other comments from any members of the exec? Or I take it back to the recommendation. Okay, seeing none, bear with me. The recommendation. It is recommended that the executive note the feedback from the public consultation and recommend that council adopt the draft updated AQAP February 2023 and draft CAS February 2023, which align with the climate change and sustainability strategy, the carbon neutrality action plan, and the work underway on the Farnham infrastructure plan. Can I have all those in favour, please show? Thank you very much, everybody. Item 11, the community infrastructure levy, which I believe is with Councillor Townsend today to introduce.
Thank you, Leader. This report seeks approval from the executive for the allocation of strategic SIL funding to the projects recommended for funding by the SIL Advisory Board in relation to the strategic SIL bidding cycle 2022-23. As you will note from the report, the council also set up a community SIL fund to support low value but desirable community infrastructure projects on applications from parish councils, with priority being given to bids from those councils with relatively low neighbourhood SIL receipts. However, they still needed to meet the requirements for strategic SIL expenditure, including the presence of development in the area that was applying. This fund amounted to about 10%, or it amounted to 10%, which was a bottom slice fund of the strategic SIL receipts, which would be available within each SIL bidding cycle. However, there were fewer parish councils in this category than was anticipated, and also the neighbourhood SIL element is actually providing significant receipts to other parish councils who meet the SIL criteria and funds their projects that have a far more localised impact. Therefore, the SIL Advisory Board, after considering this, recommended that the bottom sliced Community SIL Fund was removed from future strategic SIL bidding cycles, and the strategic SIL was treated as a whole. This approach would allow for strategic SIL funds to be available for strategic infrastructure projects. And I must stress that the removal of the Community SIL Fund would not prevent community infrastructure projects from being submitted for strategic SIL bid in the future for consideration. So it doesn't prohibit any of those parish councils coming forward. The 2022-23 SIL bidding cycle received 24 bid submissions, and the total value of the project submitted was just over 24 million, and the total SIL requested was just over 9 million. And the quality and detail provided within each of the bids did vary greatly. The values also represented figures significantly higher than we had seen in previous bidding cycles. As per the agreed governance arrangements for a SIL bid, it must be valid to meet the mandatory criteria specified in the SIL bid scoring criteria. And 3 of the submitted bids, as outlined on page 252, failed to meet this criteria and were assessed as invalid. In total, there were therefore 21 valid SIL bid submissions, and all of the valid bids were independently scored by 3 officers using the scoring criteria, and following which an average score was then taken. The scoring matrix was then presented to the SIL Advisory Board, which helped them to inform their final recommendations. Members of the board also discussed and considered the bids against the available strategic and neighbourhood SIL and the potential strategic impact of each project. For some projects, the SIL Advisory Board invited the bid applicants to attend the final meeting to answer specific outstanding questions. As a result of the 3 meetings that were held, the SIL Advisory Board unanimously agreed to recommend to the Executive that the 6 projects detailed on page 253 of your pack are allocated strategic SIL funding. Unsuccessful projects are outlined on pages 254 to 258. Officers will contact each applicant and confirm the outcome of their bid, and I know that they will be happy to discuss with them the outcome of each decision as well. I would therefore ask the Executive to approve the recommendations as outlined on page 249, which I'm sure that you will be going through. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Very pleased to see some Surrey County Council bids in there this time, and actually of a sufficient quality that they can actually be considered and approved. So that's a very good bit of progress in its own right. In particular, what those projects are, because they're obviously much needed. Any comments from any members of the Executive on any of these? Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to echo all of those comments and also add that it's good to see SIL, I think, here working as it was intended to open up funding also for NHS providers as well. The other side of that coin is that the pot is supposed to be available for more than was the case under Section 106, and it's increasingly competitive, which makes the job of the SIL board particularly unenviable when so many good causes are placed competing against one another for a smaller pot. It's not an easy thing to do. These aren't rules that we set, but I hope that the outcome is as fair, given the system, as it can be.
I think anybody looking at this will probably agree that all these 6 things are genuinely infrastructure projects. But I think you're quite right. The fact that no council pretty much in the country at the moment has any discretionary capital funding to do almost anything with, actually everybody is now competing for a very small diminishing pot, and community still doesn't really allow some of these. It's not really of a quantum enough to enable some of these things to happen, is it? Councillor Townsend.
Thank you for allowing me to come back. I just wanted to say that prompted by Councillor Merriweather there, that the amount of work done by officers on this, I know I brushed over the fact that the 3 of them look over it. I mean, they do look through an awful lot of information, and also, you know, make sure that everything's clarified with the people that are applying for the funds, and there is a lot of work that is undertaken by them, and they present then to us, and you know, it is a very streamlined process now. You know, it's a well thought out a process, and the officers do actually, as I said, carry out an awful lot of work in looking at these projects and scoring them fairly against our criteria. Thank you.
I think it's probably worth me just flagging as well the importance of attempting some level of matched funding, the actual ability for a project to receive planning permission, should it be basically the things that impact its viability are clearly fundamental to whether you agree some of these or not.
And the amount of time, Leader, that it takes to, these projects are meant to be delivered within the following 12 months. So therefore, having planning permission can, you know, if nothing has been applied for, or pre-app hasn't been taken place, then obviously that can take a lot of time out of that 12-month period. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from anybody? Okay, seeing none, moving then on to the recommendations. Recommendation 1, it's recommended the executive agree the recommendations of the SIL Advisory Board and approve the allocation of the strategic SIL funding to the projects as set out in this report. This is subject to the completion of the final checks and the signing of the funding agreements, the details of which are delegated to the Strategic Director in consultation with the portfolio holder for housing delivery. And 2, it is recommended that the executive agree the recommendation of the SIL Advisory Board to remove the community SIL from future strategic SIL bidding cycles for the reasons as set out in this report. Can I have all those in favour, please show? Thank you all. And again, thank you to the officers and indeed the members who have gone to considerable effort to make sure these are reviewed professionally and properly. So thank you. Item 2, request for supplementary budget estimate for the development management side of the world, which I go back to Councillor Townsend to introduce and have one speaker following.
Thank you, Leader. The purpose of this report is pretty self-explanatory. It's to seek approval for a supplementary estimate to cover the costs associated with various pending and upcoming appeals, and to further fund legislation required for advertising costs. So the report sets out that the service does not have sufficient budget at present to meet the costs being claimed, and the additional costs will be funded partly by a release of a planning reserve that is no longer required. That is 62,800 and 35,190 from general fund savings. It is recommended that the executive approves this supplementary estimate. As I said, it's £15,000 for planning application advertising fees, which are statutory, so they're required, and 82,990 for pending and forthcoming appeals. And I would just say that the council will always robustly defend appeals against what are locally made planning decisions. And for major applications, as we know, this is against a backdrop of top-down targets imposed on us by government within what is a developer-led planning system that penalises the council and ultimately residents when properties are not built, rather than developers who make independent commercial decisions to deliver housing onto the market, rather than seek to align with the government targets that we have to meet. Thank you, Leader.
Indeed, and we could certainly spend some time talking about why we need to appeal some of these things. But indeed, I'm sure there'll be many that support the idea of us fighting these as robustly as we can. I've got Councillor Hyman registered to speak, so I'll hand back over to you, Jerry.
Thanks very much, Leader. Yeah, yes, we must fight these as robustly as possible. And of course, this we can save ourselves an awful lot of money if we simply abide by the legislation and the national planning policy practice guidance on AA. Officers are going to attend these appeals claiming through a statement of common ground in the first place that we do have appropriate assessment, and that allows the inspector to allow the appeals on the basis that we don't have a 5-year housing land supply. But of course we can't produce an appropriate assessment, therefore we are exempted from the from the sustainability test and the presumption in favour and tilted balance. Now, there was in terms of the Thames Basin, East and Weldon Heath, was a moratorium in 2018. It confirmed we didn't have an appropriate assessment of LPP1. You told the November 2021 executive yourself, Leader, that you had doubts as to the effectiveness of SANG. And of course, if you had an appropriate assessment, you wouldn't be able to have those doubts because they would have been ruled out by the document, which of course doesn't exist. Councillor Darcy, as you'll remember, confirmed to Council last week that Natural England don't have the evidence. He's our representative at Waverley on the Joint Strategic Partnership Board. So the idea that we're taking money from developers for imaginary SANG capacity at Farnham Park so that these appeals can be go against us, so that they can be allowed, is absolutely ridiculous. If you yourself as leader were to instruct its officers to admit to the planning inspectorate that no appropriate assessment of the mitigation is possible, then we can avoid a lot of appeal costs, or any appeal costs that would come forward, and it would stop further appeals coming forward, of course, as well, that's in the flurry that we have at the moment. Which are only coming forward because we are not admitting that we don't have an appropriate assessment. So I'm asking you, can you please inform our officers? Will you now inform our officers that they've got to go into those appeals and tell the truth, and tell the planning inspectorate that we cannot produce an appropriate assessment, and that the inspector cannot either, because we cannot provide the information that's required by law. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hyman. I expect Liz and I will take this in tandem, but a couple of things. Firstly, I think SANG policy is silly, because I don't think SANG is a particularly suitable alternative natural green space in almost every occasion that they're deployed. Unfortunately, I don't control that policy because it's written by the government. I also don't need to remind you that Waverley is not Natural England. Natural England are a government agency who are funded by the government. And I think, to quote myself from the last council, are given a £50 budget for a £1,000 job. So of course they don't have the evidence and the time to go and do the things they need to do, because they aren't properly funded to do so, and the government are quite well aware of that. Unfortunately, at every single opportunity where this has been brought up, including by yourself in front of a planning inspector, these things have been thrown out. And I mean, I don't want to trivialize this or understate it, but my interpretation of many of the appeals that we have fought and have been losing are because we are subject to a 5-year housing land supply where a tilted balance is currently in effect, which is the almost prime total reason for almost every single one of these appeals being exceptionally difficult.
Because we're not telling the truth in the appeals.
Please.
Other than Webburn Lane, read the Webburn Lane one.
Sorry, I'm not dealing with those continuous interruptions. Could you mute Councillor Hyman if he does that again? Liz, would you like to add anything else to that? And certainly if I'm wrong regarding the tilted balance, please do shout.
No, Leader. I mean, Councillor Hyman's reasons for appeal bear no resemblance to the reality of why the appeals are being submitted. And whilst we have obviously gone through with Councillor Hyman at various points in time, and along with Council, he continues to hold his own opinion, which is perfectly entitled to hold that. However, the evidence that has been put forward by professional legal counsel do not agree with that, and nor do the inspector, or has the inspector, of which, as you said, he had a reasonable amount of time to talk this through with the Inspector of Local Plan Part 2. And again, the reasoning that was given by Councillor Hyman was not accepted. So, you know, the reality is that developers can appeal decisions, you know, when they're made on sites. And when we don't have a 5-year housing land supply, which means we don't have enough housing in our supposed pipeline, which the government insists we must have. So they insist we must have a pipeline, but we have no control over how and when that pipeline is delivered. So as I said before, developers will build in line with their commercial need, not in line with government targets. And, you know, when we don't have a 5-year housing land supply, the tilted balance comes into play, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. It tilts the balance in favour of development rather than in favour of the council's policies. So, you know, as you said, Leader, the tilted balance has far more to do with the reason for appeals than Councillor Hyman's comments. Thank you.
Councillor Williams, then Councillor.
Yeah, I don't really want to add anything to what's already been said and by Councillor Townsend, and what's been repeated many, many times in this all too familiar debate. But I would request that Councillor Hyman desist from misquoting my colleague Councillor Darcy. Thank you.
Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, just to reinforce the point that the planning system that we have to administer is a mess. In our particular case, it's even more of a mess, not because we are not granting enough planning permissions, but because developers are not building out the permissions that they've been given already. All you have to do is travel from Coxbridge or Woolmead in Farnham across to Dunsfold and see for yourself in the lack of bricks and mortar why we are dealing with a mandated tilted balance, and why the developers see an opportunity to go for broke in the borough.
I think I'll probably just flag that I've asked the MP for South West Surrey, the now Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, I think at least 10 separate times, to give some indication as to whether he supports the idea of borough councils having some form of punitive powers to punish developers who aren't doing that. Just off the top of my head, the ability to levy council tax on unbuilt units would be a good start. So even if we couldn't force them to build, we might at least get some revenue in for it. But of course, we have absolutely no power over any of that. Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, to agree with your comments, and Councillor Merriweather and the portfolio holders as well, about the deficiencies of the planning system. Many of us have been saying this for many years. But I'd like to comment on what Councillor Hyman said, and that you should instruct the officers to do something. That it's not the role of the leader, actually, in my understanding of the way councils work, to instruct officers to do things that would almost certainly be found to be illegal if you actually did get issued that instruction. And if Jerry ultimately wants to get a support for his argument, it seems to me the only way we'll get it is by commissioning a judicial review of what the council's doing. That's the only way you're going to get a definitive legal opinion from a judge that would agree with Jerry's opinion, because I have never seen any other senior counsel agree with the position that Jerry takes, or any planning inspector for that matter. So I think that's the only way that Jerry could actually resolve it in his favour. But certainly you're in no position, in my view, or the portfolio or the executive, to give instructions to the officers to do something that would almost certainly go against the advice of our own legal officers and the councils that we've sought independent advice from. Thank you, Leader.
I mean, as much as a sort of Louis XVI style tyranny does sometimes seem like a fun thing for us to do, generally speaking, we do between us have to listen to our officers and legal guidance, don't we? So certainly, Councillor Hyman, that is absolutely not an instruction I can give, and certainly is not one I would give, in that I already myself, without additional counsel, believe such an instruction to be unlawful. I'm sure our officers would probably confirm that. Any other speakers on this item before I move to the recommendations?
Will your officers confirm it, please?
Councillor Hyman, can you please stop interjecting? Thank you.
Will you ask your officers?
Please stop. Right. Recommendation. It is recommended that the executive approves a supplementary entry totaling £97,990 for the following costs: £15,000 for planning application advertising fee overspend, which is a statutory requirement, and £82,990 for pending and forthcoming appeal costs. Can I have all those in favour, please show? Thank you. Item 13, which I'm sure Councillor Townsend will relish introducing as ever. Cranley Leisure Centre, new build tender. After you, Liz.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you. And as you can imagine, I am delighted that over the past month, we have been out to market for the project management and design team, which includes an energy consultant as well, for the new Cranley Leisure Centre project. It has been really satisfying to see the amount of interest shown in this exciting new project that involves such cutting edge energy efficiencies. I know Councillor Williams will be very excited about that along with me as well. This will be a brilliant and important resource for Cranley and the surrounding villages, and I would like to thank the executive for their continued commitment to this multi-million-pound investment in leisure facilities in Cranley. And I very much look forward to seeing this project progress. I would also like to thank officers for all their hard work and enthusiasm for this project so far. This will be a flagship development for Waverley and contribute significantly towards the reduction of the council's carbon footprint. The evaluation of tenders for the project and design lead has been completed, and we are in a standstill period at the moment, which is for 10 days. And after that, we will be able to officially announce the team that will help to take this scheme forward. And I can say that we were extremely fortunate to have attracted the market leaders in leisure and low carbon designs. And this key appointment will be an important step in making the new Cranley Leisure Centre a reality. And as you can imagine, I can't wait. And the recommendations are outlined on page 269 of your pack. Thank you.
Thank you. And to echo some comments from earlier, the procurement has been done fantastically on this. It's been absolutely spot on, and has given us a good, I think, a really good, excellent outcome. And as you say, I think they've been nearly as excited as we've been about the idea of delivering this particular centre. For anybody that, of course, needs to understand why we need to have a new leisure centre in Cranley, I invite them to go and visit the leisure centre in Cranley, and that'll become exceptionally clear very, very quickly. Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Leader. I want to echo everything that Liz says. This is an incredibly a good thing. It's a new leisure centre. It's being designed to state-of-the-art environmental standards. It's a model of effective and efficient procurement carried out with a professional, with professionalism that's a model that we should all be proud of. I certainly am, and I hope our other colleagues sitting in other seats in this council when we all meet will be as well.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I don't think we should underestimate the challenge of the task that was actually set, and it is something that is really challenging. But I'm delighted to hear the news that we've had shared with us today, and we know that the new leisure centre for Cranley, which is long awaited, will be something which will not only be good for the people of Cranley, but it'll be good for the planet. Thank you.
Certainly, I'll be one of the many people trying to figure out how to easily get to Cranley to go and have a look at the thing when the time comes. This is yeah, an absolutely excellent scheme, and certainly considering the moving bar in this volatile economy, to have a scheme outlined and ready for tender like this is, again, genuinely a success. So let's get it going. So recommendation to the executive: number one, approve the award of the contracts to the design team and other professional services required to reach RIBA stage 5 following completion of the procurement processes, and two, delegate authority to the Strategic Director for Transformation and Governance to complete all required contractual documentation and approve execution of that contract documentation. Can I have all those in favour, please show? Thank you very much. Finally, exclusion of press and public. There is no reason to go into exempt session this evening, in which case I can close the meeting at 6:58.